Throughout all the worlds and all the universes, there's always been a few universal truths. One of which we always have a word for the things that go bump in the night or just out of view, the things that scare little children to make sure that they eat their grappa as much as they can so they grow stronger, so that they do not misbehave. The fear can be an effective tool, yet it was just that simple fear. We realized this was nothing more than a children's story, and in every single world, it's the same thing, just a different world. With the Krishna is Oikda, with the Aj is the Shuha. With us, it was simply the Veda. The humans even had a thing like that. They called it the boogeyman. We always thought it was funny trying to say that, as boogeyman is another word for. Actually, you know what? That is inappropriate for me to say. However, it is of extreme note that the humans changed the definition of what this boogeyman would actually be. It was about a decade after we discovered them. They had barely started to reach out amongst the stars. They had barely been able to even touch their own satellite, if at all, and yet we helped them to raise themselves up. They had finally started to reach the point that they did not need natural burning fuels from their own planet, and it looked as though they were finally going to reach out to the stars, something we'd been waiting on for a long, long time, as you cannot talk to a certain species until this point. There are a few, of course, who violate these rules, and if they're ever discovered, are immediately punished, but that is another story. It was not too long after we discovered these humans and brought them into the stars that they began to integrate into our societies. They were a great asset, many of them always willing to learn, always willing to help, some taking advantage of their naivete to make them do jobs that we seem to not enjoy. In fact, the humans didn't seem to enjoy them either, but seemed to get them done relatively quick, and in some cases extremely fast, as they seemed to be wanting to get done with the job as soon as possible, yet they did not want to leave the job unfinished. And for the longest time, human was known as almost a friend. It was an interchangeable word, almost. That was until on Joseph 4. On Joseph 4, a human had brought their family. Its family had several dependents. It had its female and its 3 larvae with it, one of which was still in its basket. It was not able to walk yet. I know, confusing compared to us, I understand, as we come out fully formed. Yet, it is noted that this is the way humans are. They were looked at strangely, of course, yet this human was very friendly, and so was its mate, as they would simply talk to everyone and help out where they could, just as we expected humans to do. It was not until a few younger ones decided to play with the human larvae. They decided they would play games. The humans didn't understand our games and had to be explained very, very carefully, yet they seemed to excel very quickly, which is surprising considering the size of their craniums. They also turned out to be extremely fast, as a game that we called Nikta, they called tag, and they already seemed to understand it and were extremely proficient at it. In fact, it was commonplace that when one of our young ones would come up and tap one of these larvae and simply say, tag, the human child would spin around with lightning speed and touch on the side of one of ours and say, no, tag, you're it, and then take off running with blinding speed for its size. We were astounded by this, and yet the adults seemed to enjoy watching this. They seemed to laugh, this strange kind of huffing sound they did. It was almost annoying to us, as it was almost like, as they say, nails on a chalkboard to our ears, yet we let it pass, as they were again very friendly. The translators would help out tremendously in this aspect. However, not every one of our species enjoyed this idea of camaraderie with the humans. They looked at humans as though they were beneath all of them. And when the human male was working with them and showed his proficiency at his craft, it made a few jealous. Now, this is something that is common in our species, and apparently is common in humans as well, to be jealous. However, normally this jealousy would simply drive a human to make themselves better, to simply lash out a little bit, to take the L, as they said, and yet drive on to make themselves a better human. This concept was kind of lost to us, and apparently was lost to this one as well, as he was so aggravated that all his work, his life's work for the past 2.1 of our decades, which comes out to about 7 years when it comes to humans, was simply tossed aside as the human was able to show that his research was leading absolutely nowhere, a complete dead end, as the simple idea of torsion was lost on this young researcher. He, completely embarrassed by all, was almost laughed out of the chamber, and in retribution, it ran up and slashed at this researcher's larvae. The sound that came out of his mate at that point is one that will never leave my ears. The scream bellowed throughout the entire chamber and down the halls to the point where everyone within several of our Schnecta, what the humans call meters, or is it kilometers? Kilometers, yes, could hear it as the sound echoed throughout the walls and out the door throughout the town. Most of our people simply were quiet at the time, given the time of day, and could hear this and did not know what was going on. I watched as the larvae jumped on the ground, screeching in complete agony as part of it had been cut open. The one that had lashed at it saw this and saw the rage in the human male's eyes and realized that this might be the moment he screwed up. And then he ran, all 6 legs trotting along as fast as he could. The human male, instead of giving chase, ran over to his larvae and tried to give as much medical attention as possible, reaching in, grabbing something they call a tourniquet, putting it on the child, trying to get the red iron blood to stop. Most of our doctors couldn't get close to this as their blood had a corrosive effect on our systems. So they tried to get in their suits as fast as they could to try and help this larvae. Yet, it didn't matter. Both the male researcher and his mate were holding on to this larvae as it stopped breathing. The female simply grabbed the larvae and was rocking it back and forth, sobbing. We all felt the pain it was having. Yet for us, since we have so many of our own, it does not seem to hit us as much, as this seems to be a large family for humans. We're used to having 5, 6, 7 dozen children. They're lucky to have 2 or 3 in their lifetimes, if lifetimes were a thing for humans anymore. But again, different story. With that, the look in the male's face changed. It changed to that of complete focus and rage. It looked in the direction of the one who had hurt its child and simply stood up and said, "Which way did that bastard go?" Everyone fearing this human as it stood up, even though it was not as tall as we are, we could see its determination, simply moved out of the way, a path out the door. It ran out the door as fast as it possibly could, moving its body forward to try and help move its body on its 2 legs. The large gate that it had was able to clear an amazing distance incredibly fast. It looked around as it stopped at the outside, and we could see when we reviewed the video of it later that it looked around for a moment trying to figure out, and then it looked on the ground and saw that there was a blood spatter. And then it followed that as fast as it could, trying each time to find out where the blood drop was, and eventually only went a few domiciles down and then went into another one of our buildings. From there was no stopping it. It went to the door trying to get in, and when no one answered, it simply reared back and raised its lower appendage and crashed in the door with the bottom of its foot. The door came down with a loud bang, and you could hear those inside screaming as they had no idea what had just crashed through their door. The male could be seen again on video screaming, "Where is he?" Those inside were scared, so scared they didn't respond. The male looked around, looked at the one who had hurt his child, his mate, the researcher's mate, saw that it was holding several of its young, didn't attack, but simply looked left and right and left again and up and around. And then it backed out of the room, looked around for a little while, and then saw more blood. It again followed it, but the blood spatter was so small you could almost not see it on the video without some sort of enhancement. It then went up the stairs. We lost track of it on the video. However, the audio could be heard as it crushed down another door, and the screams of the former researcher who had harmed the child, begging for his life, as you could hear each and every one of its limbs being ripped off one by one, as that human started screaming, "You bastard! You son of a bitch! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" And each time a squelch and a tear and a snap as one of its legs would come into view flying down the stairs, tumbling to a stop, still flicking slightly as the nerves were going into shock. Within a few minutes, the human came back down the stairs as it dragged the lifeless body of the former researcher down with it. No limbs, no arms, no legs. This thing that he carried now was nothing but a husk. The human walked out, no expression on its face. The eyes seemed to have no more soul. And as it walked back into the area where its child had died, it looked around and did not see his mate. And with that, he dropped what was left body of the former researcher. Where are they? Everyone moved and pointed in the direction, too scared to say anything, and he ran towards his shuttle. As soon as they got to the shuttle, we have no idea what happened inside. All we know is within 2 minutes, the door had shut and the shuttle was already lifting off. Without clearance, it took off into the sky, almost taking out several other ships on the way up. As the human finally cleared its area, we realized something. These humans were exceptionally dangerous. Yet this was not the only thing we had to worry about. As within 5 of our days, another shuttle landed. This time, it was not the researcher we thought, but one that looked very similar to him. But this one was covered from head to toe in what we can only understand as military-grade equipment. It walked from the landing bay straight to the hall where its former human was. It walked over to where the young one had perished, seemed to hold out a piece of equipment and scan the area. It gave no word, not one, as it scanned that area and then followed the same path as the previous human. No one dared get in its way, at least not until it got outside, as our own police force tried to jump in the way, screaming, "Security, security!" and the human, waving one of its arms wrapped in its mechanical device, tossed our own aside with not even a thought. It didn't kill anyone, but they were not going to be feeling very well for a while. The human once again went to the same building, following its sensors. this strange blue light that swayed back and forth and up and down, with another small, almost laser light moving around inside top to bottom. And it went to the same door that had just been fixed. It reached to open the door, but the door was locked. This time, not its lower appendage, but its upper appendage. It pulled back and then slammed it forward with unbelievable force, once again knocking the door clean off its hinges. Thankfully, this time there was no one inside. It walked around, continuing to scan. Went up the stairs. Again, this is where we lost the video, as there was no cameras upstairs. There was no sound except for it walking. That distinctive two-leg walk. And then it came down slowly. Slowly. Again scanning. But when it got to the door, it stopped. And it seemed to look at its own device. That is when it was confronted. 4 males. 4 of the hatchling brothers of the one that had its limbs chopped off stood there, all of them holding weapons. All of them looking to get into a fight. They claimed that they would be taking their revenge for the one who was slaughtered in front of his own children. And who was this human to even think about trespassing here again? And because of his transgressions, he would die. The human simply looked at them through its visor, reached up and touched a small sensor. The visor seemed to open within a second, and we could see again that it looked very similar to those of the human that had gone in there the first time. The human then spoke for the first time. "So, you're that asshole's brothers?" They looked at each other and nodded. Well, if you call that a nod for their species. The human looked, smiled, and said, "Good." Reached up and touched the sensor again, and the visor shut. Then there was a brawl that lasted about 1 minute. At the end, that human walked back to his shuttle, leaving 4 ripped apart, eviscerated bodies on the ground. The human didn't seem to take any damage. The swiftness of its movements inside those devices that it wore was absolutely blinding. At that point, we watched its own shuttle again pick up and leave. Not another word was said. These humans, because of what they're capable of, are no longer anywhere near our planets or our colonies. Hell, they're not even welcome on our ships anymore. Because now, the word that we use instead of the human's boogeyman is human. And we learned one other thing. Humans will always take vengeance for that which is done to their families. Even against other humans, this is a commonplace thing throughout their history. But again, that is another lecture. For right now, I just sit here watching my monitor, hoping that the humans will stay as far away from us as possible. For now, we live in fear of not just what comes to bump in the night, but we fear human. Ugh.